Shalom, everyone. First of all, the title of this tab is called Sha'alat Rav, Ask the Rabbi. Yeshiva.org is, there's also Yeshiva.org without IL. Yeshiva.org.il is the Yeshiva in Beit El, where Yaakov Avinu had his dream. And there's a great yeshiva there. That's where Rabbi Melamed was born and raised. No, he couldn't have been born there. He's older than 55. So, but his father, Rav Zalman Melamed, is the Rosh Yeshiva and the head of the Yishuv. Anyway, they have a Ask the Rabbi, I think, only in Hebrew, but I'm not sure. So one of the most famous questions about the Mishnah and Shabbat is chapter 7, when it talks about the order of the 39 Melachot of Shabbat. It says that Hazorea ve'achoresh, that first you sow and then you plow. And we know that agriculturally, that's not the right way to do it. You first plow, you first make the hole in the ground and then you put the seed in. And so I'm sure there's other answers, but this person asked Rav Astal the question, and Rav Yovadia ben Bartanura, who's one of the most common commentators on the Mishnah, says Hazoreh v'Choresh. Why is it not Choresh first and then Zoreh? And it's to tell us that even if the ground was hard and then you plowed it and put the seed in, and then you had to plow it again in order to cover it, that's why the Chavisha, the plowing, is written after instead of before. And so the other question related to planting specifically, we talked a little bit about Choresh when we learned about Boneh, that when we learned about building and destroying a building, we talked about evening out the ground and sweeping it when it's only a ground without hardwood or rocks or stones or mixture, etc. So really, according to one of the opinions of the Rishonim, if somebody put a seed in the ground on Shabbat and then remembered that it was Shabbat and took it out, they have not transgressed Shabbat, because a seed for a vegetable takes between 2 and 3 days until it starts rooting, and for a tree, as we learned from the laws of Orla and other laws, it takes 45 days. So planting is sounds a little bit strange, but there is this prohibition because they needed to they need to sow and and plow in order for a few things. So the melacha of choresh, which means plowing, refers to preparing the ground for sowing or planting by making furrows or holes in the soil in order to plant seeds or seedlings. Plowing also loosens and softens the soil, making it easier for roots to spread out and absorb nutrients. Thus, one who levels the surface of the ground violates choresh, because doing so softens the soil and makes it easier to prepare for sowing and planting. Why did we need sowing and planting for the preparation of the tabernacle? And there's a few answers, but the most simple one is that for the dyes that we just finished talking about, and for the plants, for the incense, and for other things that were for the Ketoret, and they had to plant all these herbs and plants to prepare those spices and incense, and also the olive oil for the shemen, etc., etc. So making even a small hole is a transgression of choresh, because a seed can be planted in it. And sometimes the Talmud discusses what the measurement is of something. So, for example, we just finished the idea of writing and painting. So we said that writing two letters that make sense is prohibited according to the Torah. Writing one letter, because in Hebrew, in Hebrew, there isn't a word that is only one letter, like in English, I, A, and maybe O. So you're not chayav from biblically if you write one letter. And so making a small hole that is big enough for any kind of seed is already a prohibition. Similarly, clearing rocks from a field, fertilizing it, and weeding are all to'odot of choresh, meaning subcategories, since these actions improve the soil and make it easier to sow and plant. Anyone who undertakes any activity in order to improve the ground prior to sowing or planting violates Torah law. Even if he does not intend to sow or plant there, he has still violated choresh, since in fact he has improved the land for sowing or planting. So I'll just give a practical example. We talked about removing stones. If you're walking on the sidewalk and there's a rock there on the sidewalk that could be a hazard to somebody, and they might trip on it and fall. By removing that rock and putting it somewhere else, or even throwing it somewhere else safely, you are not transgressing anything because the sidewalk is solid and you can't plant anything in it. But if you walk in a field or in a trail and there's a stone there, you might be transgressing that same melacha of Koresh. One may not make a hole in the dirt of a flower pot or even stake something into the dirt of a flower pot, thereby making a hole in which one can plant, as these violate the melacha of Koresh. The sages prohibited sweeping the ground in the yard out of concern that one would end up leveling the ground, thus transgressing a Torah prohibition. If it is arable land, he violates choresh. If it is land that serves simply as a yard, he transgresses boneh, as we talked about building. However, one may sweep a part of the yard that has a hard paved floor, or hardwood, or anything like that. By the way, in terms of a flower pot, there's a halacha in Isur ve'eter. If you want to change something from meat to milk, or sorry, if something became the wrong designated, there's people who put it in a plant pot. As far as I know, that is not prohibited on Shabbat because you're not making a hole, you're just sticking it into it. So, one may not kick dirt and sand or move it around with one's foot because this both loosens soil and levels the ground. Saliva that is on the ground should not be rubbed into the dirt with one's shoes to avoid leveling the ground. However, if one finds the saliva disgusting, he may step on it in the natural course of his walking, as long as his intention is not to spread it and level the ground. One who has mud stuck to his shoes should not try to rub it off against the ground because he may end up leveling the ground. Some are not concerned about this possibility and allow rubbing off the mud. The Rama and the Taz, one who wishes may be lenient, but lechatchila it is preferable to be stringent. In contrast, one may rub off the mud against the grate, tiles, or stones, even lechatchila, because you're not creating anything in that, and it is also not your ground. So if there's a muddy area because it didn't rain, it just got wet from something else, then for sure we should not be lenient. But if somebody is walking to shul and their shoes got all muddied, then they should use some kind of hard surface to take it off. And we said it already that you're not allowed to take off from the top of the shoe, but the bottom of the shoe, you should not walk into the shul with mud. So I think that that's a very practical idea. And tomorrow we'll continue with more of these laws pertaining to plants on Shabbat.